The world of magic doesn't end with the turning of a page. Love rises and falls anew, forbidden like poison or blazing like a phoenix's flame. The heroes we thought we knew uncover their hearts once more. So step into the enchantment of emotion and welcome to a world where love is written anew. The first time Hermione saw him after the war, she almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner, painfully so, with hollow cheeks and eyes that had forgotten what light was. His once perfect blonde hair had lost its shine, hanging limp over his forehead, as if it too had given up. But it was his silence that unsettled her most. Draco Malfoy, who had once filled corridors with sneers and cruel laughter, now sat perfectly still, hands clasped in front of him, as though even breathing was a privilege he wasn't sure he deserved. The air in the interrogation chamber was cold and humming faintly with magic. Runes glowed on the walls, pulsing in rhythm with the wards that contained him. Hermione felt them tugging faintly against her own magic as she stepped forward, a warning. "This is unnecessary," she said quietly to the aura on duty. "He's not dangerous anymore." The guard didn't answer, just nodded and left her alone with the prisoner. The door sealed shut with a metallic click. Draco didn't lift his head. "Come to finish what Potter started." His voice was hoarse, as though the words had been waiting days to come out. Hermione ignored the jab. "I'm not here to hurt you." He gave a hollow laugh. "That's what they all say." There was something brittle beneath his sarcasm, something she couldn't quite name. She took a seat across from him, unfolding the parchment of her assignment. Daily visits, limited magical extraction spells, no veritaserum unless approved. The ministry wanted information, not blood. "I'm here to ask about the Dark Lord's remaining enchantments," she began, tone professional. "It's believed you may have knowledge of a concealed object." Draco's jaw tensed. "Believed by whom?" "By the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." He raised his eyes finally, and for a heartbeat, she wished he hadn't. There was no arrogance there anymore, just exhaustion and something else, a quiet, restrained fear. "You think I kept his secrets?" he said. "After everything?" Hermione steadied her voice. "You were seen at Malfoy Manor the night before the final battle." His lips curved into a bitter smile. "So was half the Death Eater Circle, and most of them are dead now." "Yet you're not," she said softly. That made him look at her again, sharply this time. Their gazes held, challenge meeting curiosity, resentment meeting restraint. It was a stare that went on a second too long, and Hermione's breath caught before she broke it. She cast a faint charm, Revelio Veritatis. A thin shimmer passed between them. Draco's eyes flickered with understanding. "So, that's how it is," he murmured. "You'll dig until you find what you want." "It's my job." He leaned back, the chains at his wrists clinking softly. "And what do you want, Granger?" The way he said her name, not with mockery but with tired familiarity, unsettled her more than any insult ever could. She hesitated. The truth. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost inaudibly, "Be careful what you wish for." The charm flickered again, and Hermione knew he was telling the truth, or at least part of it. She ended the session early that day, writing the required notes with a hand that trembled more than she liked. Subject uncooperative, resistant to truth spells. But that wasn't what her mind lingered on as she left the cell. It lingered on his eyes, grey and storm-tossed, yet strangely human. That night, she dreamed of war again. But this time, when she turned in the dream, it wasn't Harry or Ron standing beside her in the rubble of Hogwarts. It was Draco, his face pale with ash, his voice a whisper she couldn't quite hear. When she woke, the image stayed. The next morning, she returned to the chamber. He was already waiting, posture straighter this time, eyes wary but not hostile. "Back so soon?" he asked, as if he'd expected her not to return. "Daily visits," she replied simply. "Lucky me." She almost smiled. Almost. "We'll try a different approach today. No spells, just questions." "Conversation, then." "Something like that." For a few minutes, silence reigned between them, thick and cautious. Hermione studied him carefully. There was something about the way he fidgeted with his cuffs, the faint tremor in his fingers when he reached for the glass of water she handed him. He wasn't the boy she remembered from school. This man was fighting something inside himself and losing. "Finally?" she asked. "Why didn't you run after the war?" He blinked. "Run where?" "Anywhere. Plenty did." A humorless smile ghosted across his lips. "I was tired of running." There was truth in that too. She could hear it in his tone. "You could have gone to Azkaban," she said. He met her gaze. "I almost did." The room felt smaller suddenly, too small for both their pasts to fit inside. When she left again that day, she didn't write a report. She didn't trust herself to. Outside the chamber, Harry was waiting. His expression was tight, concerned. "You're spending a lot of time down here." "He's our only lead," Hermione said automatically. Harry frowned. "Just don't let him get in your head." She wanted to say he already had, but she didn't. As she walked away, her mind returned to Draco's words. "Be careful what you wish for." For the first time, she wondered if she was the one being tested. And deep down, though she'd never admit it, she wanted to see him again. Not as an assignment, but as a mystery she wasn't ready to solve. And that, she realized, was exactly where the danger began. The next day, the chamber felt different. Not because of the light, it was always dim here, but because something unspoken now hung between them. Hermione could feel it before she even saw him. That thin, electric thread of tension that snapped into existence whenever two people tried too hard not to notice each other. Draco looked up when she entered. His eyes, grey, cold, intelligent, followed her movements as she set down her notes. There was no smirk this time, no mockery, just quiet calculation, as if he were trying to guess who she'd be today. Enemy, interrogator, or something else. "Still no veritaserum?" he asked, voice low, almost conversational. "Not yet," Hermione replied. "The ministry's waiting for my report." "And what did you tell them?" "That you were resisting." She met his gaze evenly. "But I didn't tell them why." He raised a brow. "Do you know why?" "Not yet," she said. "But I think you're protecting something. Or someone." The faintest flicker crossed his face. Too quick to read. Gone before she could name it. "You think too much, Granger." "I always have." Silence. Then a small sigh escaped him, almost like laughter, but sadder. "And it's going to get you hurt one day." Her pulse jumped. "Is that a threat?" "No." His voice softened. "It's an observation." The words lingered, unsettling her in ways she didn't want to admit. She turned away, pretending to check her parchment, but her fingers brushed the edge of the table where his hand rested. The contact was fleeting, the barest touch of skin, yet the magic around them shifted, humming faintly in the air. He didn't move. Neither did she. When she finally pulled back, she could feel his eyes on her. "Tell me something," she said quickly, needing distance. "Why keep silent if it could set you free?" He looked down, his chains catching the dim light. "Freedom isn't what you think it is." "What is it then?" "Being able to sleep at night." Hermione's chest tightened. That wasn't a rehearsed answer. It was truth wrapped in regret. "I can help you," she said quietly. He looked up sharply. "Help me? Granger, I don't need saving. Not by you." "Then what do you need?" His mouth curved slightly. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." She held his gaze. "Try me." He leaned forward, and for a heartbeat the distance between them vanished. Just a few feet, but it felt like nothing. His voice dropped, rough with honesty. "I need someone to see me as more than what I was." The words hit her harder than any confession of guilt could have. She wanted to look away, to reassert the barrier between them, ministry official and prisoner. But she couldn't. Instead, she whispered, "Then show me who you are now." The silence that followed was dangerous, not empty, charged, a current of something new, something forbidden. That day, the session ran longer than regulation allowed. She didn't notice the passing hours until the guard knocked on the door, breaking the spell. Draco straightened, mask sliding back into place. Hermione gathered her things, but her hand shook slightly. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Granger!" She turned. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time without anger or pride. "Whatever you think you're doing, don't." She frowned. "And what am I doing?" His smile was faint, but it carried something sharp. Getting too close. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she left without another word. That night, the ministry halls were quiet. Hermione sat in her office long after everyone else had gone, reading and rereading her notes, but the words blurred together. Each line, subject evasive, emotional barriers intact, sounded wrong, incomplete. Because what she hadn't written down was what mattered most. The look in his eyes when he said he wanted to be seen. She closed the file, pressed her palms to her temples. This wasn't supposed to happen. Interrogations were meant to extract information, not empathy. Yet every visit left her with more questions than answers. About him, about herself, and beneath it all, an ache she couldn't quite name. The fourth day, she told herself she was only returning to keep up appearances, to prove she was objective. But the moment she stepped into that room and saw him waiting, she knew she'd lied to herself. He looked better today, less pale, almost alive. There was a faint spark in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "You're late," he said. "Meetings," she replied curtly. "About me?" "Yes." "Decided my fate yet?" "Not yet." She paused. "Maybe you should help decide it." He tilted his head. "You really think I have that kind of power left?" "You underestimate yourself. And you overestimate me." But the corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. She sat down. "Let's make a deal. You talk, I listen. No spells, no tricks." He leaned back, folding his arms. "And in return, I'll tell the ministry you're cooperating." He considered it for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, Granger. A trade of truths." She wasn't sure when the interrogation turned into a conversation, but it did, seamlessly, dangerously. They spoke of small things first, the war, the manor, the endless trials. He didn't justify himself. He didn't deny his past either. He simply spoke, and she listened. Somewhere between accusation and forgiveness, something fragile began to grow. At one point, he said quietly, "You still believe in redemption, don't you?" "I have to," she answered. "Otherwise, none of this means anything." He looked at her for a long time before replying. "Then maybe there's hope for both of us." When Hermione left that day, she knew something irreversible had begun. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was its dangerous prelude, understanding. Outside, the night air felt heavy. She walked quickly through the dark corridors, heart hammering, unsure whether she was running towards something or away from it. And somewhere deep in the lower cells of the Ministry, Draco Malfoy lay awake in his cot, staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice echo through the silence. Neither of them slept, because both knew, even if they couldn't yet admit it, that the line between duty and desire had just begun to blur. Hermione told herself she could stop any time, that she was only doing her job, fulfilling a duty to the Ministry and nothing more. But the next morning, she found herself walking faster than usual, heart already beating quicker as she descended into the depths of the high-security wing. Each step echoed against the stone, and the air grew colder. But she no longer felt it. What she felt instead was anticipation, unwanted, dangerous, impossible to explain. When she opened the door, Draco was standing. He wasn't supposed to stand. He usually sat, slouched in resignation. But today, he was by the table, hands resting on the edge, as though waiting. "You shouldn't be out of your seat," she said automatically, though her voice didn't sound like her own. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. They took away even the illusion of choice. She tried to sound detached. "You look better. Almost like a person again," he asked, half a smile on his lips. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." The air between them was different now, less cautious, more volatile. The familiarity of routine had created something dangerous. Comfort. He seemed to sense it too, studying her as if trying to decide whether she was a threat or a lifeline. "You're late," he said again, and it was almost teasing. "Meetings," she replied. "Ah, deciding my fate again?" She met his eyes. "I told them you might be worth listening to." He blinked, surprised. "Did you now?" I said, "might." For the first time, his smile reached his eyes. It was fleeting, faint, but it changed everything. That day, she asked him nothing about Voldemort. She couldn't bring herself to. Instead, she asked about the manor, about what it was like living under his family's name after the war. "I thought the manor was destroyed," she said. "It was rebuilt," he replied quietly, "but it doesn't feel like home. Just a monument to ghosts." "And your mother?" "She left England, somewhere quiet, somewhere she can forget. I envy her for that." Hermione hesitated. "And you?" "I'm not sure forgetting is something I deserve." She studied him for a long time, trying to reconcile this broken honesty with the boy she remembered. The boy who called her a mudblood in a crowded corridor, who smirked as she cried in the bathroom after. "You're not that person anymore," she said softly. His gaze flickered to hers, unreadable. "No, but I'm not someone else either. I'm just what's left." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of everything they couldn't say. Later, when she brought him his dinner, he reached for it and accidentally brushed her fingers. The touch was brief, so quick that anyone else might not have noticed, but both of them froze. Hermione felt the jolt like static under her skin, something alive that shouldn't have been there. He looked up slowly. "Careful, Granger. You'll make people talk." "Let them," she whispered, before she could stop herself. She wasn't sure which of them was more surprised, him for hearing it, or her for saying it. She pulled her hand back quickly, cheeks burning. "You should eat," she muttered, avoiding his eyes. He took the plate without another word, but she could feel his gaze on her for the rest of the visit. Every time she looked up, he was watching her, and there was something in his eyes that frightened her more than anger ever could. Longing. That night, the dreams returned. Not of war this time, but of the cell, of cold stone and pale light, of grey eyes watching her from across the table, unblinking. She woke before dawn, restless, heart racing. She told herself it was guilt, that she was simply losing focus, that whatever was happening wasn't real. But when she saw him again that morning, she knew denial was useless. "Why do you come here every day?" he asked suddenly when she sat down. She hesitated. "It's my assignment." "No," he said quietly. "That's the excuse, not the reason." She swallowed. "Because I want to understand you." "Understand me?" He leaned forward slightly. "Or save me?" She opened her mouth to argue, but couldn't. His gaze pinned her in place, sharp and knowing. "Don't," he said softly. "You'll only end up disappointed." "Maybe I already am." That broke his composure. He looked away, jaw tightening. "You shouldn't care what happens to me." "Maybe I shouldn't," she said, voice trembling. "But I do." It wasn't a confession, not exactly, but it was enough. The words hung between them, alive, breathing, impossible to take back. Draco stood abruptly, chains rattling. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." He turned to her then, face caught somewhere between anger and disbelief. "You think this is some redemption story. You think you can fix me, Granger. You can't. I'm not—" He stopped, voice breaking. Hermione rose too, matching his height, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "I don't want to fix you," she said. "I just don't want you to fade away like you already have." For a moment, everything in the room held still. Then he stepped closer, too close. The air seemed to thin, charged and fragile. "You don't know what you're doing," he whispered. "Then tell me," she breathed. "Tell me what I'm doing." He didn't answer. He just stared at her, eyes searching her face as if memorizing it. And then, as if something inside him broke, he said, "You're making me remember I'm still alive." Hermione couldn't breathe. Neither moved for several seconds. The only sound was the faint hum of the wards pulsing on the walls. She could feel her own magic reacting, drawn toward his like a tide. Then, slowly, she stepped back. "We should stop." He gave a hollow laugh. "We both know we won't." That evening, she wrote her report as usual, but the ink smudged under her trembling hand. Her official notes said nothing of what had truly happened, but her heart wouldn't stop replaying it. The nearness, the words, the look in his eyes. She closed the file and pressed her quill down until it snapped. In the silence that followed, she whispered into the empty room. "What are you doing to me, Draco Malfoy?" But there was no answer, only the echo of her own heartbeat, and the knowledge that whatever line she'd sworn never to cross was already behind her. The next day, Hermione promised herself she would act as if nothing had happened. Professional, composed, immune. But the moment she opened the cell door and saw him, standing again, waiting. Every careful wall she'd built in her mind trembled. He didn't speak at first, neither did she. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, humming with everything unspoken. When he finally did speak, his voice was quiet. "You didn't come yesterday." "I had reports to finish," she said, a touch too briskly. His expression didn't change, but his voice carried a trace of something. Disappointment, maybe. "I thought perhaps you decided I wasn't worth the effort." Hermione hesitated. "Don't make this about..." "About what?" His tone sharpened suddenly, eyes flashing with that old, brittle pride. "About the fact that you can't decide whether you hate me or pity me." She drew in a breath. "Neither." "Then what is it?" Her voice faltered, and she hated herself for it. "I don't know." He stepped closer. The chains allowed only a few feet of movement, but it was enough to make her pulse spike. "You're too honest for your own good, Granger. And you're too proud for yours," she said before she could stop herself. Something flickered between them. Anger, yes, but also recognition. They stared at each other, the air crackling with words they couldn't say. Hermione could hear her own heartbeat, feel her own magic stirring like a restless thing under her skin. Then, without warning, he laughed, a low, bitter sound that wasn't really laughter at all. "You really don't belong here." "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said. "No," he replied. "You belong somewhere with sunlight, books, people who don't break everything they touch." Her throat tightened. "You're wrong." "Am I?" he whispered. Hermione wanted to leave. She should have left. But instead, she said softly, "You're not beyond repair, Draco." He looked at her sharply, as if the sound of his name from her lips startled him. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "And you're not my healer." They stood in silence for a long time after that, each refusing to look away first. When she returned to her office that evening, she couldn't write a single word. The parchment remained blank, her quill hovering uselessly over it. Her mind was still back in that room, caught in the memory of his eyes, how they seemed to shift between storm and surrender in the space of a breath. She thought of what he'd said. "You belong somewhere with sunlight." And for the first time, she wondered if she was the one losing herself in the shadows. The next morning, Draco wasn't alone. 2 auras stood beside him, wands drawn, a third reading from a scroll. Hermione froze as she entered. "What's happening?" "Procedure update," the lead aura said stiffly. "We're authorized to attempt deeper extraction spells." "No," Hermione said quickly. "That wasn't approved." "It was," he interrupted. "Higher authority. You can observe if you wish." Draco's eyes met hers. There was no fear, only quiet defiance. "It's all right, Granger. Let them try." She could feel her temper rising. "He's not resisting." "That's not your call." She knew arguing would make it worse, but she couldn't stop herself. "You'll destroy his mind before you find anything useful." The Auror gave a humorless smile. "That's not my concern." The spell struck before she could reach her wand. Draco convulsed, the sound tearing from his throat raw and human. The glow of the charm burned against his temple, forcing memories to the surface, breaking them apart. "Stop it!" Hermione shouted. He gasped, eyes squeezed shut. "Don't!" The Auror lifted his wand again. Hermione acted before she thought. Her spell hit the man square in the chest, knocking him backward. The others turned instantly, wands raised, but the noise had already summoned the guard captain. What in Merlin's name is going on? Hermione's voice shook but didn't break. They exceeded authorization. I'll file a complaint with the Wizengamot myself. The captain looked between them, hesitated, then ordered the others out. When they were gone, Hermione turned back. Draco was slumped against the wall, breath uneven, sweat on his forehead. She knelt beside him. Draco. He winced. You shouldn't have done that. You could have been killed. So could you. Their eyes met again, and for a moment the world narrowed to that single point of connection. He managed a faint smile. You're reckless, Granger. You're welcome, she murmured. He closed his eyes. I didn't ask for saving. Maybe not, she said, but you needed it. When she returned to her flat that night, exhaustion hit her like a curse. She sat by the window, watching the faint light of Diagon Alley below, but her thoughts stayed in that cell. The image of him, defiant even when broken, wouldn't leave her mind, and beneath it, the terrifying realization. She'd crossed more than one line today, not just with the Ministry, with herself. The following day, Draco didn't look at her when she entered. You shouldn't have interfered, he said quietly. I couldn't stand by. You'll lose your position. Let them take it, she said, surprising herself. He finally looked up. Why would you risk everything for me? The answer came out before she could shape it. Because I can't stand watching you suffer. He stood, the chains clinking softly. You think this is suffering? This is mercy. You have no idea what I've done. Then tell me, she pleaded. Tell me so I can understand. He took a step closer, his expression unreadable. You wouldn't forgive me. Try me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost a whisper. The last thing I did for him was destroy something that could have brought him back. Hermione froze. What? Draco's voice shook, but he didn't look away. A fragment of him. Hidden magic. My mother begged me to, said it was the only way to end it for good. I did it, and I've been waiting for punishment ever since. Hermione's breath caught. The truth, so simple, so devastating, hung between them. She whispered, You ended it. He laughed bitterly. No, Granger, Potter did. I just cleaned up the pieces. She wanted to reach for him, to touch his arm, to say something that could undo the years of pain carved into his voice. But she stopped herself. The rules, the walls, all the things that separated them. They were paper thin now, but they were still there. Draco, she said softly, you don't have to face this alone. His gaze softened, only slightly. And you don't have to destroy yourself trying to save me. He turned away. The conversation was over, but as she left, she heard him whisper, barely audible, Thank you. And for the first time, Hermione wondered if saving him wasn't what she was doing at all. Maybe he was the one saving her. He was still there the next morning, paler than before, eyes darker. The faint mark of the extraction spell lingered like a bruise along his temple. Hermione's chest tightened at the sight of it. She didn't greet him, just crossed the room and wordlessly set her parchment down. Granger, he said, voice quiet but firm. I told you not to come back. She didn't look up. And I told you I don't take orders from prisoners. The faintest shadow of amusement crossed his face, but it vanished quickly. You shouldn't be here, he murmured. I'm not leaving until this case is closed. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Then I hope you like ghosts, because that's all that's left in this room. She met his gaze. You're not a ghost. His eyes flickered. Pain, disbelief, something she couldn't name. Aren't I? Hermione's throat tightened. You're still capable of choice, of remorse. That's more than most of them ever had. He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You make it sound noble. It isn't. It's just exhaustion. She didn't respond. They sat in silence, broken only by the faint hum of the wards and the rhythmic ticking of the enchanted clock above the door. It would have been easier to leave, to file her report, to tell herself she'd done all she could. But something about the way he sat there, so utterly still, made her stay. You said you destroyed something, she said finally. A fragment of him. Why didn't you tell anyone sooner? He hesitated, gaze distant. Because I didn't do it for the Order or the Ministry, or even for my mother. Then who? He looked straight at her. For myself. Hermione blinked. For yourself? I wanted to stop running, he said quietly. To end it on my own terms. I didn't care if it cost me everything. You're not the only one who lost everything, she whispered. I know. His voice softened. That's why I didn't want to add to your grief. The words took her off guard, gentle, deliberate, too careful to be anything but true. For a moment, the room seemed smaller, their shared silence intimate rather than heavy. Granger, he said suddenly, breaking the moment. Why do you still believe in me? I don't, she said, but her voice betrayed her. I believe in what you could still be. His lips twitched. You're insufferable. I've heard that before. He smiled faintly. It's strange, how some things never change. Days passed, though Hermione couldn't tell one from the next. Her life outside the Ministry blurred into routine. Sleepless nights, half-finished meals, unread letters from Harry and Ron asking where she'd gone. Inside the cell, though, every minute was sharp. Each glance, each word felt deliberate, fragile, electric. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he didn't. On those days, she'd just sit across from him, parchment forgotten, listening to the faint sound of the wards breathing between them. Once, he asked, Do you miss them? Who? Your friends, the ones who can still look at you without remembering. Her throat caught. Every day. He nodded slowly. I envy them. They got to move on. You could too, she said quietly. I don't deserve to. That's not your decision. He looked at her then, really looked, as if weighing her words. You sound like you've forgiven me. I haven't, she whispered, but I'm trying to understand. His expression softened, the faintest flicker of gratitude passing across his features. Understanding's more dangerous than forgiveness, Granger. Why? Because it makes you care. That afternoon, a storm rolled across London, and thunder echoed through the underground corridors. The lights flickered, the runes dimming for a heartbeat. For the first time since the war, Hermione felt something she couldn't quite explain. A shiver that wasn't fear, but recognition. When she entered Draco's cell, he was standing by the far wall, watching the rain trickle down the enchanted glass. Do you ever think, he asked without turning, that maybe none of us won? Hermione stepped closer. We're alive. That's something. Is it? He asked. Or is it just punishment we haven't finished serving? She wanted to argue, but couldn't. Instead, she stood beside him, watching the thin streaks of water slide down the invisible barrier. He turned his head slightly, close enough that she could feel his breath. You shouldn't stand this near. Why? She asked. Because I might forget I'm not allowed to want this. Her heart stumbled. The air between them thickened, trembling with the weight of what they both refused to name. Then don't forget, she whispered. For a heartbeat, neither moved. His hand twitched at his side, as if he might reach for her, and then, slowly, he did. The chains limited him, stopping inches from her arm, but the intention was enough. The magic in the room shivered. Hermione didn't pull away. She should have. She didn't. Draco, she breathed, his name catching like a secret. He looked at her with eyes that held both ruin and hope. You shouldn't say it like that. Like what? Like it means something. Maybe it does. The tension between them snapped, quietly, invisibly, like a held breath released. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it ended. The lights flickered again, the wards hummed louder, and the moment collapsed back into what it was supposed to be, forbidden. Hermione stepped back, trembling. This can't happen. He smiled faintly. It already did. That night, she didn't go home. She sat in the empty archives instead, the echo of his voice running through her mind. She told herself it was madness, that she was risking everything for a man who might still be lying. But the memory of his eyes in the stormlight refused to fade. She pressed her palms to her face, trying to breathe. Her magic pulsed under her skin, restless, drawn to something it shouldn't be. And somewhere deep beneath the ministry, Draco lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the ghost of her name still on his lips. He didn't believe in redemption. But tonight, for the first time in years, he believed in something else. That maybe, just maybe, she would come back tomorrow. She had learned to hide the way she breathed before opening the door, because each time it felt as if she was stepping into a place that existed outside the world. The stone, the hum of wards, the still air, all of it dissolved when she saw him. The days had stripped the sharp edges from him. What remained was something quieter, more dangerous for its calm. He looked up when she entered, and the faintest trace of a smile touched his mouth. "You're late again." "By 3 minutes," she said. "I counted," he murmured, and that somehow made her pulse stutter. She crossed to the table and laid out the parchments she no longer cared to read. Her fingers trembled slightly when she reached for her quill. "You shouldn't wait for me," she said without looking up. "I don't have much else to do," he answered, voice low. "Besides, it's easier to breathe when you're here." She froze, quill mid-stroke. The words shouldn't have mattered, yet they fell into her chest like something heavy and bright. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Then stop giving me reasons to." She looked up. Their eyes met, hers sharp with warning, his unreadable. The silence stretched, tight as a held breath. It was the same every time. The push and pull, the risk that felt too close to falling. He talked more freely now. Not about Voldemort, not about the war, but about small human things. The way the manor smelled after rain, how his mother used to hum when she read. He spoke as if remembering surprised him. One afternoon she asked, "Do you regret it?" "Which part?" he said. "All of it." He thought for a long time before answering. "Regret's a luxury. I don't deserve it. But sometimes I wonder what I'd have been if things had been different, if I'd met you before any of this." Her breath caught. "You did meet me. You just weren't looking." He laughed softly, a sound that wasn't cruel anymore. "No, Granger, I wasn't ready to see you." That night she stayed later than usual. She told herself it was for observation, for the sake of the report, but both knew better. The guards had changed shifts. They were alone. "Why haven't you told anyone what really happened with that fragment?" she asked suddenly. He leaned back, the chains at his wrists rattling softly. "Because no one would believe it. They think monsters can't make the right choice." "I would believe you," she said. He looked at her for a long time. "I know." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of something dangerous. Trust. She should have left then, but instead she sat on the edge of the table. "You're different now." He tilted his head, studying her. "You say that like it's a good thing." "It is." His gaze traced her face, lingering too long. "Careful. You'll make me think there's still a chance." "There is." He laughed once, softly. "You really are impossible." "Maybe." He looked away. "And what would you do with me if there was a chance? Bring me tea? Hide me in your flat?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe I'd just listen." Something in his expression shifted, the sarcasm falling away. He took a slow breath. "No one's listened to me in a long time." "Then talk," she whispered. So he did. He spoke until his voice grew hoarse, about guilt, about fear, about how silence had become his only armor. Hermione listened, not as an interrogator, but as a witness, feeling each word settle into her bones. When he finally fell quiet, she reached across the table. Her fingers brushed his wrist, the metal cool between them. "You're not alone anymore," she said. He stared at their hands, the touch so slight it could have been a mistake. "Granger," his voice cracked. "Don't do this to yourself." "I'm not doing anything." He looked up, and the truth in his eyes frightened her. He wasn't pleading for himself. He was pleading for her. Later, as she left, the guard at the door frowned. "Long day." "Productive," she managed. He nodded, but his eyes followed her too closely, and she realized that others were beginning to notice. She didn't go home that night. She wandered London instead, aimless, the city lights flickering like scattered charms. The air tasted of rain and smoke. Every reflection in every window reminded her of him. His stillness, the way he watched her as if waiting for something he couldn't name. When she finally reached her flat, she didn't light the lamps. She stood in the darkness, pressing a hand to her chest. Her heartbeat felt wrong, too loud, too hopeful. She whispered to the empty room, "What are we becoming?" No answer came, only the echo of her own voice and the rain against the glass. The following morning, there was a new guard at the door, a younger aura with sharp eyes. "Orders from above," he said curtly. "No unsupervised sessions." Hermione's pulse spiked. "Who gave those orders?" He shrugged. "Not my concern." When she entered the cell, Draco was sitting perfectly still, but the look in his eyes told her he already knew. "They're watching us now," he said quietly. "I noticed. You shouldn't have come. I always come." He gave her a look that was half pain, half wonder. "You're going to ruin yourself over this." "Maybe," she said softly, "but not today." For a while, they talked about nothing. Books they'd read, spells she was researching, the ministry's new regulations. It felt almost normal, almost safe. Then the guard coughed from the doorway, reminding them of the eyes beyond the walls. Draco's expression hardened. "See? You don't belong here. They'll crush you just for trying to understand." "Then let them," she said. His voice dropped. "You don't mean that." "I do." He stood abruptly, the chains pulling taut. "Stop. Don't throw yourself into my darkness to prove something. You deserve light." "And what do you deserve?" she asked. He looked at her, and his answer was a whisper. "I don't know, but it isn't you." The words should have hurt. They did. But beneath them was a plea, a warning meant to protect her, and that, somehow, only made her love him more. That night, the dreams returned. This time she saw him standing outside the cell, free, his face lit by dawn. He held out his hand, and she almost reached for it. But the alarm of the wards shattered the vision. She woke gasping, tears on her cheeks, the sound of his voice still echoing in her head. By morning, she had made her decision. Whatever it cost, she would find a way to set him free, because the truth she had been running from was now undeniable. This was no longer about duty. It was about him. The following days blurred into each other, an endless rhythm of forbidden conversations, stolen glances, and quiet lies. Hermione felt herself unraveling slowly, thread by thread. Each time she stepped through that door, she told herself it would be the last. Each time, she knew it wouldn't be. The ministry grew restless. Rumors spread in whispers, the kind that carried teeth. Some said she was too close to the prisoner, others that she'd lost her objectivity. None of them were wrong. When she entered the chamber that morning, Draco was waiting as always. But something in his posture was different, tense, guarded. "They've been questioning me about you," he said without preamble. Her breath caught. "What did you tell them?" "The truth." "And what is that?" He looked up, eyes steady. "That you come here because you believe there's something in me worth saving. That you're wrong." The words should have stung, but his voice wasn't cold. It trembled, low and frayed around the edges. "Why are you pushing me away?" she asked quietly. "Because they're watching. Because every time you walk in here, I see you risking everything." "I'm not afraid of them. You should be afraid of me." That stopped her. He stood then, chains scraping against the stone. "I don't know what I'll become if I start needing you, Hermione, and I'm already too far gone to pretend I don't." Her name in his mouth, soft, unguarded, broke something inside her. "You're not," she whispered. "Too far gone." He laughed, but it sounded like pain. "You still don't see it. You think redemption looks like forgiveness. It doesn't. It looks like this, like a man who can't touch the only person who sees him." The silence that followed was unbearable. Hermione took a slow step forward, crossing the invisible line between sense and something else entirely. "Then don't think," she said. "Just feel." His breath hitched. "If I do, I won't stop. Maybe I don't want you to." The look he gave her was almost inhuman in its intensity. Hope, fear, and longing tangled together. For a moment, he reached for her. His fingers hovered inches from hers, trembling with restraint. And then he stopped. "Don't make me break the only rule I've kept," he whispered. She closed the distance anyway. Her hand brushed his wrist, bare skin against skin, and the spell in the air shattered like glass. The wards flared, reacting to their magic, casting faint light around them. Draco froze, but he didn't pull away. "Tell me to stop," she whispered. He didn't. The next day, she arrived to find his cell empty. Panic struck like ice. The guard on duty looked up lazily when she demanded an explanation. "Relocation," he said. "Temporary." "Where?" "Level 3, isolated holding." Hermione didn't wait for permission. She stormed through the ministry corridors, ignoring the eyes that followed. When she reached the lower level, she found him in a darker cell. No light, no comfort, just stone and silence. "What have they done?" she breathed. He lifted his head slowly. "You shouldn't be here. They moved you because of me, didn't they?" He didn't answer, and that was enough. Hermione pressed a hand against the barrier. "I'll fix this." He laughed quietly. "You can't fix what's already broken. I'll find a way." "Granger, don't call me that," she said sharply. "Not like that. Not when—" She stopped herself. "When what?" he asked, voice low. "When it matters," she whispered. The silence that followed was fragile, suspended on the edge of something neither dared name. Finally, Draco exhaled, shoulders sinking. "They think you're compromised. They're right." She met his gaze. "I don't care." He gave a small, incredulous shake of his head. "You'll ruin yourself for nothing." "Not for nothing," she said. "For you." The words hung between them, heavy and final. That evening, she was summoned to the Aura Command Office. Harry sat at the far end of the table, his face drawn tight with worry rather than anger. "Hermione," he began carefully, "we've had reports about your visits." She folded her arms. And people are saying you're emotionally involved." Her jaw tightened. "They're wrong." Harry sighed. "Are they?" She met his eyes. "Draco Malfoy is the only person alive who might still hold a fragment of Voldemort's knowledge. I'm doing my job." Harry leaned forward. "You're risking more than your job." She didn't flinch. "Let me finish this, Harry. Please." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. 1 week, no mistakes. The next day, she was back. The guard hesitated, but let her through. Draco was sitting in the shadows, head bowed. "They gave you a choice, didn't they?" he said quietly when she entered. "What choice?" "To keep coming, or to stop." "Yes, and you chose this." "I chose you." His eyes lifted, grey and sharp and full of something dangerous. "Don't say that, Hermione." "It's true." He stood slowly, the chains clinking as he moved closer. "You don't understand. I don't know what to do with it. Your faith, your kindness. I don't know how to be the person you think I am." "Then be who you are," she said. He gave a small, broken laugh. "You wouldn't like him." "I already do." He stared at her, unmoving, for what felt like forever. Then he whispered, "You're going to regret this." "Maybe, but not today." When she left, she felt lighter, though she couldn't explain why. The ministry halls, usually cold and impersonal, seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. In her pocket, she carried the slip of parchment he'd slipped into her hand when the guard wasn't looking. A single line written in slanted ink. "There's more to the secret than they know. Trust me, but don't follow." She didn't know what it meant, only that she would ignore the last part, because for the first time, she wasn't following orders. She was following him. The message burned a hole in her pocket for 2 days. "Trust me, but don't follow." Hermione read it until the ink nearly faded, and still she didn't know which part of it terrified her more, the command or the trust it implied. By the 3rd morning, she couldn't take the waiting anymore. She went to the records office before sunrise, using her clearance to access the confidential files. The clerk on duty didn't question her. No one did. Not Hermione Granger, war heroine and ministry prodigy. She used that reputation like a shield now, cold and deliberate. In the dusty archives, she found it. Draco's official record of charges. There was a final note at the bottom, one she hadn't seen before. Subject to be transferred to permanent containment if cooperation fails. She closed her eyes, a cold weight settling in her chest. Permanent containment wasn't a euphemism. It meant isolation spells that stripped a wizard of magic entirely. Slow erasure. By the time she reached his cell, she was shaking. He was waiting for her again, sitting cross-legged on the floor this time, as if he'd been expecting her anger. "You knew," she said, voice low, trembling. "You knew they were planning to—" "Yes." "And you didn't tell me?" "I told you not to follow." "That's not an answer." He looked up, expression unreadable. "If I'd told you, you'd have tried to stop it." "I still will." "Hermione." "No." Her voice broke on the word. "You don't get to make this choice alone. Not anymore." He stared at her for a long moment, then whispered, "It's already been made." The silence that followed was unbearable. The air in the cell felt thinner, heavy with magic that tasted like endings. She took a step toward him. "You can't just give up." "I'm not giving up. I'm sparing you." "From what?" "From becoming me." Her breath caught. "You think I'm capable of what you did?" He shook his head. "No, I think you're capable of mercy, and that's worse." Hermione's heart twisted. "Stop talking like there's no future." He smiled faintly, tiredly. "Some of us already had ours." She reached for him without thinking. He flinched back, not out of anger but instinct, like a man afraid to touch light. "Please," she whispered, "don't make me watch you disappear." He closed his eyes. "You shouldn't care this much, but I do." The words escaped before she could stop them, and for a second he looked almost human again. Not the prisoner, not the name that carried so much history, just Draco. He swallowed hard, eyes darting to her face. "Then I need you to promise me something. Anything. When they move me," he said slowly, "don't come after me. Don't fight for me in front of them. Promise." "I can't." "Promise me, Hermione." She shook her head. "No." His chains clinked softly as he leaned forward, voice raw. "Please." The word, coming from him, was a wound. "I'll promise nothing," she whispered, "because I'm not going to let them bury you alive." That night, she used every contact she had. Kingsley, Harry, even old members of the Order. Each conversation ended the same way. Silence, hesitation, pity. Draco Malfoy had no allies left. And yet, in her chest, something fierce began to bloom. The same thing that had driven her through every impossible battle. Defiance. She spent the next day forging signatures, rewriting authorizations, reactivating spells long locked behind ministry wards. Every charm, every enchantment she broke tightened the noose around her career. But she didn't care. By dawn, she had a plan. When she returned to his cell, he looked worse. The drain spells were already in place. Faint, ghostly runes circling the floor, siphoning the energy from his magic. His skin was pale, his voice weak. "They started early," he said simply. "I know," she whispered, dropping her bag on the floor. "That's why we're leaving." He blinked slowly, as if unsure whether he'd heard right. "Leaving?" "I've set a diversion spell. It'll disable the outer wards for 6 minutes. We can get to the lower tunnel before the alarm resets." He stared at her. "You're mad." "Probably. And if we're caught? Then I'll tell them it was my idea." He gave a breath of disbelief that might have been a laugh. "It always is with you, isn't it? Stand up." Hermione, now! He hesitated, then rose to his feet. The runes on the floor flared faintly as his magic resisted the suppression field. The sight of it, the reminder that power still lived beneath his skin, filled her with hope. She whispered the unlocking spell she'd memorized, tracing the air with trembling hands. The chains at his wrists dissolved into silver mist. For a moment, neither moved. Then, quietly, he said, "You shouldn't have done that." Too late. He looked at her then, truly looked, and something inside him gave way. "You'll lose everything for this," he said. "Then I'll finally understand you," she replied. The wards above them cracked like thunder. The alarm flared to life. She grabbed his hand, cold, steady, and pulled him through the doorway. For the first time in years, he crossed a threshold without permission. The magic stung, but it didn't stop him. They ran. Through the corridors that smelled of stone and dust and fear, past startled guards and half-spoken spells. Hermione's wand moved faster than thought, disarming, deflecting, never killing. Draco stayed close behind her, silent but sure, following her light like a shadow that refused to fade. They reached the last gate before the surface. It glowed crimson, sealed by a ministry-binding charm she hadn't accounted for. "Hermione," he warned, "there's no time." "There's always time," she snapped, raising her wand. The spell hit the gate. It shuddered, cracked, but didn't open. Her magic flared again, harder, desperate. Draco stepped forward. "Let me." He pressed his hand against the barrier, eyes closing. The runes burned bright, reacting to his energy, not resisting, but recognizing. The gate flickered, then split apart with a low hum. When she looked at him, his expression was unreadable. "I told you," he said softly. "Some doors still remember me." They slipped through just as the alarms reached their peak. Outside, the night air hit like freedom. Cold, unbelievable, real. For a heartbeat, they stood under the open sky, neither daring to breathe. Then he turned to her, voice breaking. "You just condemned yourself for me." Hermione met his eyes. "No," she said. "I just chose you." Somewhere behind them, the ministry roared to life. But in that single moment, beneath the fractured sky, the weight of war behind them, nothing else existed except the sound of his breath and the echo of her heart, finally beating without permission. The world above ground did not welcome them kindly. Cold rain poured from the London sky, turning the cobblestones into a mirror of blurred lights and trembling shadows. Hermione pulled her hood tight, the heavy cloak she'd conjured moments ago already soaked through. Beside her, Draco moved with a stiffness that wasn't from fear, but disbelief, as though the night itself were a fragile illusion that might break if he breathed too loudly. "Where are we going?" he asked, voice low, cautious. "Somewhere safe." "There's no such place for me." She turned sharply, meeting his eyes. "There is now." He didn't argue, but she could feel his doubt pressing against her resolve. They slipped through the side streets, avoiding enchanted patrols, using the shadows as cover. Every few minutes, Hermione muttered a disillusionment charm over them both, her hand brushing his sleeve. The touch lingered longer than necessary each time, neither of them mentioning it. By the time they reached her flat, dawn was threatening the horizon. The city was quiet, grey, waiting. Hermione locked the door behind them and cast every protective charm she knew until the air shimmered faintly. Draco stood in the center of her small sitting room, dripping water onto the rug, eyes darting across the shelves lined with books and parchment. It was a space that smelled of tea and ink and life, everything his cell hadn't. "You live here alone?" he said quietly. "Yes." "Of course you do." She turned, studying him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." He looked down. "Just, you always were better alone." "Were." She set her wand aside. "I'm not sure that's true anymore." The words slipped out before she could stop them. He lifted his head, eyes flicking toward her, unreadable. For a heartbeat, the silence between them pulsed, heavy with something that felt both fragile and inevitable. Then he exhaled softly. "You shouldn't have brought me here. I couldn't leave you there." "You should have," he said. "You don't know what they'll do when they find out." "Then we won't let them find out." He laughed quietly, a sound without mirth. "You think you can outsmart the entire ministry?" Her chin lifted. "I've done it before." He stared at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. A weary admiration, the beginning of surrender. "Granger," he said softly, "you're mad." "Then we're even." They spent the day hidden behind layered wards, the curtains drawn, the world beyond them reduced to whispers. Hermione brewed tea to keep her hands busy, though she spilled half of it when she handed him a cup. He took it without a word, fingers brushing hers just enough to make her heart stumble. For hours, neither spoke of escape or consequences. They talked of smaller things. The storm outside, the way the rain sounded against glass, the books stacked unevenly on her shelves. It was strange, almost domestic, and that strangeness hurt more than fear ever could. At one point, he asked, "Do you ever get tired of being the one who saves everyone?" She smiled faintly. "Do you ever get tired of pretending you don't want to be saved?" He didn't answer, but the look he gave her said everything. By nightfall, the silence grew heavier again. The wards hummed softly, a reminder of the fragile world they'd built inside these walls. Hermione sat by the window, watching the faint glow of lamplight in the fog. Draco approached quietly. "You haven't slept." "Neither have you." He hesitated, then said, "You shouldn't have risked this. They'll trace the spells you used." "I used runic cloaking. They won't find us yet." "And when they do?" She turned to face him. "Then I'll handle it." "You always say that." "Because it's true." He smiled, barely, but it was there. Still trying to control the world. Someone has to. He stepped closer, the dim light catching in his eyes. "You can't fix everything, Hermione. Not even me." "I don't want to fix you," she whispered. "I just don't want you to disappear." He stopped inches from her, the tension between them like static in the air. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do." He looked at her for a long, unbearable moment, and then said, "You're the only person who's ever looked at me and not seen a Malfoy." She swallowed hard. "And you're the only one who's ever looked at me and not seen a savior." Something inside both of them broke quietly at that. The space between them vanished. She didn't remember moving. One step, maybe two, and then his hand was at her cheek, hesitant, trembling. Her eyes fluttered shut at the touch. For a heartbeat, everything else, the war, the ministry, the danger, fell away. His breath brushed her skin. "Hermione!" She opened her eyes. "Say it again." He did, softer this time, like a secret. The moment stretched, suspended between fear and desire, until reality crept back in. He dropped his hand, stepping away. We can't. I know. But neither of them moved farther apart. The knock came hours later, sharp, controlled, ministry style. Hermione's blood ran cold. She grabbed her wand, signaling Draco to stay silent. The wards vibrated under a probing spell. Someone powerful. "Open up, Granger." The voice was unmistakable. "Harry." Draco stiffened, his eyes going wide. "You didn't?" "I didn't," she whispered fiercely. "They tracked us." Harry's voice came again, gentler this time. "Please, Hermione, let me in. Don't make this harder." Her heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at her to protect the man standing behind her, the one she should never have trusted and couldn't stop caring for. She whispered the charm to thin the air between them, a whisper through the wards. "Harry, listen to me. He's not what you think." "I know exactly what he is," came the reply. "And I also know what you're doing. You've crossed a line." Draco stepped forward. "Let him in." She turned sharply. "No. It's over, Hermione." His voice was calm, resigned. "You saved me once. Don't lose everything for it." "I don't care about—" "You do," he interrupted. "That's why you have to stop now." She stared at him, trembling, every part of her at war. Then Harry's next spell hit the barrier, splintering it. Sparks cascaded across the floor. Hermione turned back to Draco. His expression was steady, determined, gentle. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "remember that you were the only person who made me want to live." Before she could answer, he lifted his wand, not at her, but at himself, and whispered a spell she didn't recognize. Light flared, blinding, swallowing him whole. When it faded, the room was empty. Hermione dropped to her knees. Harry burst through the door seconds later, wand raised. "Where is he?" She looked up slowly, tears cutting through the ash on her cheeks. "Gone." Harry lowered his wand, confusion flashing into pity. "Hermione!" But she didn't hear him. Her gaze was fixed on the spot where Draco had stood, on the faint trace of silver magic still lingering in the air, a farewell that shimmered like a promise. And in that silence, she finally understood what he had done. He hadn't escaped. He'd saved her. They said he had vanished, that his body had dissolved into light, leaving no trace of spell residue or apparition signature. The ministry sealed the case within the hour. "Containment breach," the report said. "Subject presumed destroyed in self-defense." Hermione knew better. She sat in her flat long after they left, the broken wards humming faintly around her like a ghost's breath. The ministry had stripped her of clearance, suspended her post, and warned her to stay silent. Harry had tried to reason with her, to make her rest, but she couldn't, because something inside her whispered that he wasn't gone. Not gone in the way they thought. She'd seen the light before, the exact hue of that silver magic. Not death, transformation. Draco Malfoy had never been one for surrender. Days bled into nights. She wandered through the motions of her life as if through fog. The empty flat, the unanswered owls, the ministry's silence. Yet every sound in the wind, every flicker of light made her turn her head. It wasn't until the 7th night that she found the first sign. A single folded parchment lay on her windowsill, sealed with a drop of melted wax. No emblem, no sender, just her name, written in a familiar hand. She broke the seal with shaking fingers. Not gone. Not yet. Don't look for me. D. That was all. but it was enough to set her world spinning again. She didn't sleep after that. Every thought became a map. If he had survived, where could he have gone? Who would help him? The logical part of her, the ministry-trained mind, reminded her he had no wand, no allies, no home. But another part whispered, "He has you." And she realized she was already looking for him, whether he wanted her to or not. Weeks later, the trail led her to the coast, a cliffside cottage she'd read about once in an old Order archive. It had belonged to a healer who worked with cursed injuries during the war, a place no one remembered anymore. The night was clear when she found it. The wind smelled of salt and rain. She could feel magic pulsing faintly from the cliff's edge, not wild, not dark, but restrained, controlled. Hermione lifted her wand, whispered a detection charm, and saw it. A shimmer of silver wards woven through the air like threads of light. Her heart slammed in her chest. She stepped through. He was there, sitting by the hearth, thinner, pale, his blonde hair longer now, shadows beneath his eyes. But he was alive. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly between them. "You shouldn't have found me," he said finally. "I wasn't looking." He smiled faintly. "You always were a terrible liar." Hermione's throat tightened. "You sent the note." He nodded once. "I had to make sure you were safe." "Safe?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You vanished in front of me. Do you have any idea what that did?" "I didn't have a choice," he said quietly. "They were going to arrest you. That spell, it was a displacement charm tied to my own magic. I'm off the grid now. They think I'm dead, and you're free." "Free," she repeated, voice breaking. "I'm not free. I'm here." He stood slowly, every movement careful, as if the air itself hurt him. "You shouldn't be, but I am." He stared at her for a long time, then whispered, "You're going to ruin yourself for me again. Then let me." He closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. "You don't understand. I can't go back. Not to the world, not to you." "Then I'll stay here." He opened his eyes sharply. "You can't. Watch me." The argument stretched late into the night, until exhaustion turned their words into something softer, quieter. Hermione sat by the fire, knees drawn to her chest, watching the light play across his face. "Why this place?" she asked finally. "It's quiet. The wards here were mine once. My father built them before the war, a safe house no one else knew about. He never used it. Until now." He gave a humorless smile. "Irony, isn't it? All that power, and this is what's left." She studied him for a moment. "You could have called for me sooner." "I wanted to," he admitted. "But I thought if you forgot me, you'd be safe." "I tried," she whispered. "It didn't work." Their eyes met, and there it was again, that fragile current that always lived between them, the thing that refused to die no matter how far they fell. He exhaled slowly. "You should go before morning." "Say that again," she said, "and I'll hex you." He actually laughed, a sound she hadn't heard in months, soft and disbelieving. "You really haven't changed." "No," she said, "but you have." Something in his expression shifted, a quiet surrender. "Maybe you're the only reason I did." The hours that followed passed in silence. She dozed by the fire, and when she woke, the first light of dawn was spilling through the windows. Draco was still awake, sitting near her, watching the sea. He spoke without turning. "They'll find me eventually. You know that. Then we'll run again." He looked back at her, and there was something fierce and aching in his eyes. "You'd really give up everything for this?" "I already did." He shook his head, stepping closer. "You don't even know what you're saving." "I do," she said. "You." The word hung in the air, final, undeniable. He knelt in front of her then, his hand trembling as it brushed against hers. The contact was barely there, but it burned like fire. "You shouldn't love me," he whispered. "Then why do you keep making it impossible not to?" For a moment, neither breathed. Then, slowly, his fingers closed around hers. A silent surrender, a confession without words. The storm outside had quieted. The fire crackled, steady and low. In that fragile peace, Hermione realized something she hadn't dared before. She wasn't saving him anymore. She was choosing him, knowing it might destroy them both. And for the first time, Draco didn't pull away. He held her hand as if it anchored him to the world. The first light of morning touched the sea, turning the horizon to gold. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Because in the stillness between them lived everything that words could no longer contain. Grief, forgiveness, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't an ending at all. It was the moment between ruin and redemption, the one place where their story still belonged. For the first time in months, Hermione woke without the taste of ash in her mouth. The sound of the sea filled the small cottage, slow, steady, alive. Morning light poured through the thin curtains, spilling across the wooden floor and the 2 untouched cups of tea from the night before. Draco was gone. For a heartbeat, panic flared, but then she saw him outside, standing barefoot on the cliff edge, the wind tugging at his shirt, hair whipping against the pale sky. She watched from the doorway, her pulse steadying as she realized he wasn't trying to leave. He was just standing there, breathing. She stepped out quietly. "You shouldn't be out in the open." He didn't turn. "You're awake." "You disappeared." "I couldn't sleep." The breeze caught his voice and carried it away before it could reach her. She came closer, stopping just behind him. "Nightmares?" He gave a small, hollow laugh. "Wouldn't you, if your whole life was a mistake you somehow survived?" Hermione shook her head. "It's not a mistake to be alive." He finally turned to her. "Maybe not for you." She stepped closer, enough for their hands to brush. "I didn't save you to hear you talk like this." "Then why did you?" She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Because you were worth saving, even if you don't believe it yet." His expression changed. Something flickered there, sharp and soft all at once. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You always say things like that, as if you could speak the world back into being. And you always pretend not to listen." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the only way I can." They spent the morning mending the wards, silent, careful, almost domestic. Hermione traced new runes along the threshold, while Draco restored the barrier's outer edge. His magic, though weaker, still held precision. She found herself watching the way the light curved around his hands, how he moved as though each motion was an apology to the world. When the work was done, he leaned against the wall, breath shallow. "You've trapped yourself here with me," he said quietly. "Seems fair," she replied. "You've been trapped long enough." He looked at her then, long and searching, as if trying to find a lie in her eyes and failing. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" She smiled. "Never have." That evening they shared dinner in silence. The cottage filled with the smell of herbs and smoke. It should have been ordinary, but nothing about them ever was. At one point, Draco said softly, "I keep wondering what it would have been like if we'd met here first. Not at Hogwarts. Not in war." Hermione paused, her spoon halfway to her lips. "Maybe we wouldn't have survived each other then, either." He chuckled quietly. "No, but at least it wouldn't have hurt this much." There was a beat of silence before she said, "It still would have." He met her gaze. "You think everything can be rewritten?" "Not everything," she said. "Just the ending." Later, as the fire dimmed, Hermione found herself sitting beside him on the small couch, her shoulder against his. The closeness wasn't planned. It never was. But it felt inevitable, like the tide returning to the shore. "Tell me something true," she whispered. He thought for a long moment, then said, "I never hated you." She turned to him. "Not even when you wanted to?" "Especially then." Her breath caught. "And you?" he asked. "Something true." She hesitated, then said, "I was never afraid of you. Not really." He gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. "You should have been." "Maybe," she said, "but fear never stopped me before." His gaze lingered on her, unguarded. The distance between them dissolved again, the air heavy with everything that had been left unsaid. His fingers brushed hers, testing, asking. She didn't pull away. For a moment, there was only warmth, their hands, their breath, the crackle of dying embers. Then, quietly, he said, "If we stay like this, they'll find us." "I don't care." "You should." "I can't." He exhaled, his forehead falling against hers, the touch light but devastating. "You make it impossible to do the right thing." Maybe the right thing stopped mattering a long time ago. The words settled between them like a spell neither could undo. When she woke the next morning, the couch was empty. The fire was cold. For an instant, panic surged, but then she saw him outside again, barefoot in the dawn light, pacing the cliff's edge. His silhouette against the sky looked like something between freedom and surrender. She joined him without a word. "They'll come soon," he said softly. "I know. And when they do, I'll be ready." He turned to her, eyes storm grey and tired. "Don't fight them for me this time." She didn't answer. "Hermione," he pressed, his voice breaking. "Promise me." She met his gaze, steady, unyielding. "No." Something like relief flickered across his face. "I thought so." They stood in silence, the wind tangling her hair, the sea roaring below. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Saving you?" "No. Loving me." The question stopped her breath. She looked at him for a long time before answering. "I never had a choice." He nodded slowly, eyes glinting in the light. "Neither did I." Hours later, as the sun climbed higher, a faint vibration rippled through the wards, the unmistakable hum of detection spells closing in. Draco felt it first. "They're here." Hermione's hand tightened around her wand. "Then we run." "No." His voice was quiet but firm. "If you stay, they'll destroy you too. I told you, I'm not leaving." He took her face in his hands, desperate now. "You have to live. For both of us. Draco." But before she could speak again, he pressed his lips to her forehead, soft and fleeting. "You once said love was never comfort. You were right." And then the world around them exploded in light. When Hermione opened her eyes, she was alone on the cliff. The wards were gone. The sea was calm. The air still carried the faint shimmer of his magic. but no trace of him. Not this time. She sank to her knees, wind whipping her hair, and for the first time since the war, she wept without restraint. Below her, the ocean stretched endlessly, vast and merciless. Yet in its rhythm, she could almost hear him, soft, familiar, like a promise that refused to die. And though she didn't know if she'd ever see him again, she felt something new rise within her. Not despair, but certainty. Whatever he had done, wherever he had gone, their story wasn't over. It was only changing form. 3 weeks passed. The world returned to its rhythm. At least the part of it that still wanted to pretend Draco Malfoy had never existed. The Ministry restored Hermione's clearance. Harry stopped asking questions. The Prophet ran a final article titled "The Last Secret of the War." Malfoy's vanishing confirmed. Everyone believed it. Everyone except her. She could still feel him. Not in the physical sense. There was no trace of his presence anywhere, no magical residue, no sign of apparition, but in the quiet places between moments. When the wind shifted just right, she swore she could hear the echo of his voice, that soft, reluctant warmth that had undone her so completely. It wasn't madness. Not exactly. It was connection. A thread she couldn't sever, no matter how many times the world told her to move on. She went back to work. She learned how to look like herself again, to smile when people asked how she was, to write reports that meant nothing and attend meetings that filled the silence. But at night, the act collapsed. She'd find herself at her desk, surrounded by open books, searching for something she couldn't name. Not information, not proof. Him. Sometimes she'd whisper into the empty air, "If you're out there, show me." For days, there would be nothing. And then, once, her lamp flickered, a small pulse of silver light, gone before she could draw breath. It was enough. By the second month, she began to dream again. Always the same dream. The cliff, the sea, the wind tearing through her hair. But instead of absence, there was a figure standing at the edge, looking back at her. Not gone, not alive, something in between. He would say her name, always softly, like it was a spell only he could cast. And she would wake with her heart pounding, certain it wasn't only a dream. One night, she decided she couldn't wait anymore. She left her flat without telling anyone, following the same road that had once taken her to him, the coast road that twisted through fog and memory. The air smelled the same, salt, smoke, and something wild. The cottage was still there, though weathered now, its wards faint but intact. She stepped inside, and everything hit her at once. The smell of firewood, the shadow of 2 empty cups on the table, the faint outline of where his boots had stood. Her knees nearly gave out. "Draco," she whispered. The silence was unbearable. It stretched, hollow and endless, until something barely audible shifted in the air. A whisper. "You came back." Her head snapped up. The voice wasn't in her ears. It was in her mind. She reached for her wand instinctively. "Where are you?" "Don't be afraid." "I'm not," she said, though her voice trembled. "Just tell me. Where?" "Here." But not like before. The air shimmered faintly, silver threads of magic dancing in the dim light. She felt her breath catch. "Show yourself." The threads pulsed once, then gathered, slowly, delicately, into the shape of a man. His outline glowed softly, translucent but unmistakable. Draco. Hermione's throat tightened. You're not dead." His voice echoed quietly, both near and far. "Not alive either. The spell. It bound me between worlds. I thought it would end when the wards broke, but it didn't. Her eyes filled with tears. You're trapped. I'm anchored, he corrected. Here, to you. She shook her head, heart racing. There has to be a way to bring you back. He smiled faintly, the same small, wry smile she remembered. Always trying to fix what shouldn't be fixed. I won't accept this, she said, stepping closer. I can find a way. He looked at her, the light of him flickering slightly. Hermione, if you bring me back, the Ministry will destroy us both. I don't care. You should. She reached out, and for an instant her hand met his, warm and cold at once, like touching water that remembered how to burn. The contact sent a shock of magic through the room, flaring the candles to life. He closed his eyes, savoring the moment. You shouldn't be able to touch me. I always find a way, she whispered. He laughed softly. You always do. They talked until the candles burned low. She told him about the Ministry, about Harry, about how everyone had let him fade into rumour. He told her fragments of what he remembered from the space between, dreams stitched together by memory and longing. When dawn began to break, he said, You can't keep coming here. Try and stop me. Hermione, no, don't ask me to forget you again. His expression softened, grief and tenderness woven together. You never forget anything, do you? Not when it matters. He stepped closer, or rather, drifted closer, the air between them trembling. Then listen to me. Whatever happens next, promise me one thing. What? Live, even if I can't. Her breath hitched. Don't you dare turn this into a goodbye. It's not, he said. It's what's left. The light around him flickered, and she felt the magic thinning, like a thread stretched too far. Draco, no. He reached for her again, his fingers brushing her cheek, the contact barely real, but enough to steal her breath. I'll find a way back. I promise. And then he was gone. Hermione stood alone in the cottage, the candles burning low, the first light of morning creeping through the cracks in the walls. Her hands still tingled where he'd touched her. She could have collapsed, screamed, broken, but instead she smiled through the tears, because she believed him, because she always had. Outside, the sea roared softly, carrying the faint shimmer of silver light over the horizon. He wasn't gone, and she wasn't finished. Not yet. Hermione stopped counting the days. Time had become elastic, stretching and folding in on itself, measured only by the sound of waves and the faint shimmer of silver that appeared sometimes in the corner of her vision. Draco came and went like a thought. Some days she would wake and feel him beside her, a ghost of warmth against the chill of morning. Other days the air would be still, heavy, waiting. His presence had changed, softer now, less an apparition than a memory that refused to stay quiet. She didn't tell anyone, not Harry, not the Ministry. What could she say? I'm in love with a man who exists between breaths. They would pity her at best, confine her at worst. So she carried the secret alone, guarding it like fire cupped in trembling hands. The cottage had become her world. She wrote there, researched, lived half in the physical, half in the space between. Her shelves filled with books about soul anchoring and partial transference, ancient theories the Ministry had banned after the war. None of them described exactly what Draco had done, because no one else had ever survived a spell like that. Sometimes When she grew too weary to think, she would speak into the empty room. "You said you'd find a way back." And sometimes, not always, the air would tremble, and his voice, faint but sure, would answer, "I'm trying." On one such night, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the windows, the wards humming with strain. Hermione sat by the hearth, a dozen parchment pages spread across the floor, her hair damp from the sea wind. She'd been awake for nearly 2 days, chasing a single thread of theory about the boundary between physical and ethereal forms. When the thunder cracked overhead, the candles flickered, and the air behind her shifted. She didn't turn immediately. She felt him first. The faint pressure of magic brushing against her, the temperature drop that wasn't unpleasant but intimate, familiar. "You're late," she whispered. His voice was closer this time, steadier. "You sound disappointed." She turned, and there he was, clearer than before. Not solid, not yet, but shaped by more than light now. His expression held something she hadn't seen since before the prison. Mischief, gentle and fragile. "Every time you appear," she said, standing slowly, "you seem more real." "Every time you call me," he said, "you make me want to be." Her breath caught. "Then let me help." "You already are." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint shimmer where his outline met the air. She lifted her hand, hesitant. "Can I try?" Her fingers brushed his chest, or where his chest should have been. It wasn't touch, not exactly. It was sensation, like the memory of warmth pressed against her palm. She gasped softly. "See?" he murmured. "Almost." Tears stung her eyes. "Almost isn't enough." "I know," he said, "but it's more than nothing." They stood like that for what felt like forever. 2 halves of the same unfinished spell, caught between longing and impossibility. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "I found a ritual. Ancient. It could anchor you back." He frowned. "At what cost?" "I don't know yet." "Hermione, I don't care." "You should," he said, voice sharp now. "If it's tied to the soul." "I'd give mine," she interrupted. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then he whispered, "Don't say that." "I mean it." He shook his head, a faint echo of movement. "You're not trading your light for my shadow." "Then what do you want me to do? Pretend you're not here? Pretend you don't matter?" "I want you to live." "I am living," she said fiercely. "This, us, it's the only thing that feels real anymore." He closed his eyes, the faint outline of him flickering like candlelight in wind. "Then maybe that's the danger." The storm grew worse. Lightning illuminated the walls in flashes of silver. Hermione grabbed a book from the table, flipping through pages that had already begun to fray from use. "There's a convergence spell in here, one that stabilizes form across planes. It might pull you back fully." Draco's expression hardened. "Or destroy you." "I've faced worse odds." "Not for me. For us." He gave a short, helpless laugh. "You've always been impossible. And you've always been worth it." Something in him cracked at that. The faint glow that formed his shape brightened, his voice trembling. "If this doesn't work, it will." "If it doesn't," he repeated, "promise me you'll let me go." She hesitated. "I can't." "You must." "No," she said, eyes fierce even through tears. "Because you didn't let me go." The wind howled through the cottage, flinging open the shutters. The candles went out, and for a heartbeat there was only darkness. And then, suddenly, light. Hermione whispered the first words of the ritual. The runes carved into the floor flared gold. Draco's outline wavered, then solidified, flickering between planes. He shouted her name, but she didn't stop. The air grew heavy, electric. Magic surged through the room, alive and desperate. She felt it sear through her veins, tearing at the space between them. His form began to sharpen. Real skin, real eyes, real breath. And then, just as she thought she had him, the spell broke. The light imploded. Hermione was thrown backward, the world shattering into sound and smoke. When the dust cleared, she was on the floor, her lungs burning. The runes were gone. The air was still. Draco? For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then, a cough, low, human. She lifted her head slowly. He was lying a few feet away, pale, shaking, but solid, real. Her heart stuttered. She crawled toward him, hands trembling, afraid to blink. "You're here," he whispered hoarsely. "I'm here." She reached out, afraid he'd vanish again. But when her fingers brushed his face, there was warmth. Real, fragile warmth. He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest. His heart was beating. Hermione let out a choked laugh that was half sob. "You came back," he smiled weakly. "Told you I would." Then softer. "You shouldn't have risked it." "I'd do it again." He closed his eyes, breath steadying under her palm. "I know." She leaned forward, forehead against his. "Don't leave me again." "I'll try not to." Outside, the storm was fading, the sea quieting. Inside, the air hummed with the last traces of magic, raw, wild, alive. For the first time, there was no barrier between them, no chains, no wards, no rules. Just two people who had fought the world and each other and somehow found their way back from the edge. The fire caught again, flaring to life on its own, as if the universe itself had decided to believe in them, if only for this moment. Hermione exhaled, her hand still on his chest, feeling each fragile heartbeat like a spell that refused to end. He smiled, faint but certain. "You see, you never needed to save me." She smiled through tears. "Maybe not, but I wanted to." And as the light of dawn crept across the sea, they stayed like that. Two survivors bound by something deeper than forgiveness, something fierce and fragile and utterly alive. Whatever came next didn't matter. For now, he was here. For now, that was enough.